Welcome to Papa's Workshop. If you have ever wanted to add an additional dimension to your projects and create projects with an oval shape, it can be rather challenging. Now, of course, if you have a CNC machine, that becomes much easier. To be able to create the ovals on the CNC machine, you can be able to make just about any size that you want and be able to do it in a matter of moments and be able to carve, whether it's picture frames, tabletops, whatever you choose to do. But what happens if you don't have the CNC machine? Well, I am going to show you a very simple and easy to build jig today that will allow you to very easily draw the ovals. In this case, I'm just using a pen, but you could scale this up and attach a router to it and accomplish the same thing and cut the ovals for your project. So let's get started today. First thing I've done is opened up a new window and easel, and I'm going to come right up here to this box and select the circle icon, and with that I can just highlight this box and grab this little handle right here, stretch it out, and I can do that in the directions that I want and make an oval. And I can do this any size that I want by using the handles, or I can come right over here and I can select where this is cutting on the path, or I can select it outside the path, whatever I want to get the exact oval that I want. The other thing that I can do is with this drop down window, I can type in exactly the size of the oval that I want. So using the CNC machine, it's extremely easy to be able to cut the oval. And these ovals can be used for picture frame, for tabletops, for anything that you can possibly imagine. You can look at the preview and you can see how it's going to cut. You can also enlarge this to the max size of your CNC machine. In my case, I can actually carve up to about 30 inches by 30 inches. However, if that's not enough, then in many cases tiling would be an option, and that I've discussed in other videos. But again, the options for being able to carve the ovals on a CNC machine is virtually limitless and extremely easy. Now, the question becomes, what happens if you don't have a CNC machine? Can you still cut out the ovals? Can you make the tabletops? Can you make the picture frames? Well, I'm here to say, yes, you can, and let's make a very simple jig to accomplish just that. Now for the jig that I'm making today, I just grabbed some scrap material to be able to do this. You can make large ones, you can make small ones, it really doesn't matter. The size of the jig that I'm going to make today is 8 inches by 8 inches. That's going to be the size of the base for this jig. And I'm just cutting this on the table saw to be able to get this part started. Now just so you know, the reason that I chose the 8 by 8 is because this particular piece of scrap particle board was 8 inches wide. So that was the determining factor. And really for no other reason did I decide to use the 8 by 8 square. Now there's many different ways to be able to make this jig, and what I decided to do is be able to cut the slots so that they're at a 15-degree angle. And the easiest way to set that is with my little tool that measures exactly the 15-degree angle with my electronic protractor. Now as a reference point before I cut my 15-degree angles, I want to be able to divide this 8 by 8 square into 4 quadrants. So I'm just going to line up my ruler, mark my 4 inches going each direction, and using the square, I'm just going to draw the line and divide it into the 4 coordinates. This actually gives me my X and my Y axis that I need to be able to make the ovals. Now I only use the X and the Y axis reference from the sake of those out there who are used to working with the CNC machine. But for the matter of this jig, it really doesn't matter. The primary reason that I went ahead and divided this into the 4 quadrants is to be able to get an idea of how large that I want to cut the blocks that will attach to this base. I have the saw set at the 15-degree angle, and I have some strips of wood that I'm going to be able to use to be able to make this slot. So I can just cut this at my 15-degree angle, and I want to be able to run this through on 2 different sides. Now, just so you know, off camera, when I cut these long strips, I cut the one side at the 15-degree angle. So I want to make sure that when I cut this second 15-degree angle, that it's actually cutting in the correct orientation. Now, these 4 blocks will just lay into each of the various quadrants, and it will create a slot for another piece of wood to be able to slide through. Now I'm just taking a leftover piece of scrap, and I'm going to go ahead and cut a long strip. And again, there's a 15-degree angle on one side already, and I'm cutting this one to establish the second 15-degree angle on the other side of this longer strip. And this is going to be used to be able to create first the alignment to make sure that the squares go on straight. And the second, I'll cut this to be able to create my little small blocks that I need. Using that long strip that I just cut, I'm going to go ahead and get this alignment set so that it is square to my reference lines, and I'm just going to go ahead and nail this in. Now granted, I could use glue and these pen nails, but again, this is just a real quick scrap wood jig to be able to show you how it's going to work. You can get a lot fancier in your shop if you wish, but this is just a good prototype to show you the theory and the process behind it. Now, it is very important that these 2 slots are exactly perpendicular, and they need to be parallel to each other on the individual slots so that this wood will slide. You want the wood tight, but you don't want it so tight so that it does not move. So this takes just a little bit of adjusting and making sure that it's set exactly where it needs to be before you staple it to the base. Now, it's also worth noting that I am not going to put any wax onto this little slot. I'm not going to put any wax on the blocks of wood to make it slide easier. And this is all things that you could do to be able to make this jig work smoother. But again, this is just a prototype to show you the theory behind it and to give you some inspiration for you to be able to make your own in your shop. Now, as I move around to each of these 4 blocks as I install them, you can see that I check both directions to make sure that it's running smooth. If it catches like that, I'll need to make a small adjustment to be able to make sure that those are parallel and that will slide easily. But remember, I do not want it to have any slop. So it's worthwhile to take that just extra moment to make sure that it will slide in both directions smoothly, and then nail it in place. So that is the whole basis behind the whole entire jig. Should I decide to make a fairly small oval, oftentimes the corners of these jigs will get into the way. For that reason, I'm going to solve the problem before there is a problem, and I'm going to take this over to the saw and cut off these corners. They're really not needed at all. And all I'm doing is just using a speed square. I'm not even measuring it. I'm just estimating the amount that I want to cut off. And I'm just cutting off this 45-degree angle. Now I do need to go back and add a couple more of the little pen nails to be able to make sure that the blocks are secure, because that does eliminate some of the pins that I had in place. And I don't want those blocks to move at all. At the miter saw, with the saw set at the 45-degree angle, I can make these 4 cuts very easily and very quickly. Now I'm not using any stop blocks or anything that will make this exact. I'm only using these reference lines that I quickly drew into place to be able to cut this. Again, I am not worried about having this super precise on this part. It's not necessary. Now here's a real good close-up look at the finished jig. This is the base showing my 15-degree angles, and this is all I need. Now remember that long strip that I had that I used as a gauge? I'm going to cut this down to 2 pieces, each of them 1.5 inches. The length of this is really not that critical. You want it large enough so it goes through the slot, but you want it small enough so that they don't bump into each other. The other thing that I've done is I used an 8/32 screw and just drilled my hole in the center and screwed that into place and put a nut on it so that it would move. The next thing is I just want to test this. And as I slide this through, it will have a tendency to be able to catch on the corner. I don't want that. So I'm just going to take this over to the sander, round that off a little bit, and that will make it slide through much easier. So here's a quick look at how I've sanded off the edge, and now it will slide through a little bit easier. It did catch a little bit, so it was back to the sander one more time. Okay, back at the jig again for one final test, and this is actually working quite well. Again, I'm not going to put any kind of wax or anything on it to make it slide easier. This is all I'm going to do. The last component I need is a long stick to be able to actually draw the oval. Now if you have this set up and you want to make like tabletops or larger picture frames, you can make a larger jig and actually attach the router to it. I'm going to attach the pin to this one. For my quick demonstration, this stick is actually 14 inches long, and I'm setting this up where at the one end I am drilling in 1-inch increments for the holes, and I'm just making a series of several holes. And at the other end, I'm just going to drill 1 hole to be able to attach my felt pin. Now as far as the width of this little strip of wood, I don't know. I didn't even measure it. This was literally just a scrap piece of wood that I had, and I just went over and grabbed it and said, this will work, and that was it. But it's roughly 3/4 of an inch wide by about a 1/2 inch or maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. Don't really know, doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect the performance of this jig. Now for the first quick test, I'm just using a piece of foam board, and I'm just placing this jig in the approximate center of the poster board. Now I'm not securing this jig down to the surface. If I was actually doing a project, that would be secured to my project surface so that it wouldn't move. But in this case, I'm having to use one hand to hold the jig in place so it won't move, and then I use the other hand to be able to draw out the oval. And I think you can see that this performs quite well, and it makes the oval very easy to accomplish without the CNC machine. It's also very easy to be able to adjust. So just by changing the placement of the blocks into the various holes, I can make this oval either larger or I can make it smaller. And I can also change the shape of it. Now one problem that I had while I was drawing this oval is that the pin needed to be further into this stick, because what was happening is my stick, as I rotate it, was actually hitting the jig, and that did not work well. So I needed to be able to make that adjustment, and I'm going to put the pin where it goes through that stick a little bit deeper, and that's going to solve the problem. Now you can see on this final test that it's working very, very smoothly, and putting that pin where it really needed to be able to keep the stick off of the surface of the jig made all the difference in the world. So this is a very quick and easy jig that can be made, and it's something that you can perhaps find very useful in your shop to be able to add a new dimension to your projects by creating the ovals. Hi everyone, Thank you for watching my video today. If you like the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below and the little bell next to it so you'll be notified on the different videos that I upload. Also, check out the videos over here to be able to stay up to date on the happenings in my shop. So again, thank you for watching my videos.